open mic.
Hi both, Eley and Elaine. Welcome to the podcast. You guys are here today to talk specifically not about yourselves, which I know is very painful for any writer to be invited on and not talk about themselves. But I'm being slightly ironic there, I suppose. Most of the writers we have on find it excruciating. Afterwards, I get emails going, "Can I delete all of that and maybe just talk about John Updike?" But we're here to talk about the Dylan Thomas Prize today, which is coming up very soon and is it's got a great shortlist, very exciting. So we have Elaine Canning, who, as well as being awesome, is also a novelist and the head honcho at. What is your title at the Dylan Thomas Prize? I just always think of you as the boss.
The director, but you can call me anything you want.
I think the boss works. I think the boss is good. And Eley Williams, writer. I'm a big fan of yours, actually, Eley. I probably should have mentioned that before we came on to do that thing where I try and embarrass you live on the recording. But so first of all, Eley, I was very interested that you're judging. If I haven't said that, you're one of the judges this year. I'm not going to tempt anybody into talking about their favourites in terms of the shortlist to give anything away. But you were shortlisted last year. Is that right? Was it last year? It was.
That's right.
So how did that work? Were you shortlisted and then they invited you on to the judging panel because you didn't win and they thought, well, we better try and make it up to us?
Yeah, it's a pity prize, I think. They saw me just being so awfully but brilliantly judgmental of everyone in the process. They thought, wow, okay, should at least have to that. No, I Elaine very kindly approached me in, I'm trying to remember when, I want to say kind of November, December-ish, to ask whether it'd be something I'd be available for and I'd be interested in. I'm a huge fan of all of these writers and their work. So the fact that they're on the shortlist, the whole process has just been marvelous. And it's really enriched my bookshelves and my reading experience over the past couple of months. I'm really delighted. Especially, the fact that I was on the shortlist last year, as was Sean Hewitt. So it's a strange feeling of being in a revolving door but wearing different costumes perhaps going on there. But no, Elaine, you can probably recall the timeline of it a bit better than I can.
Normally October, November time, we will put out invitations to our judges. Really important for us that we do have representation on the panel from our brilliant alumni, as we call them, like Eley. This is it's a very distinctive prize. It's a prize, as you know, both that covers all genres. So along with having representation from experts across all of the genres that the prize represents, it's also really important to have our brilliant alumni on there. So Eley is one, Prajwal Parajuli is another. Prajwal was shortlisted for the prize back in 2013. And then he was also a judge in 2023 and he's back again this year. So we're delighted. It's such a gorgeous panel. They have been joyous to work with, as I keep telling them all. And I can't believe that we're so close now to the end. It's always one of my very best highlights to work with the panel throughout these months. So yeah, we start October, November time, and then we run until mid-May, which is when we make the winner announcement.
So I don't want to get bogged down in process, bearing in mind that half of our listeners will be fascinated with how prizes work, and the other half will be like, let's talk about the books. But so the judges are delivered a shortlist, is that right? And then you judge on that shortlist.
The judges are delivered a long list in January.
Right. Okay.
A long list of 12, and then the process in terms of the judges' roles and responsibilities starts from there.
How many entrants do you get before you choose a long list?
On average, we get anything between 140, 170 entries a year. So a lot. As far as I know, that's equivalent to all of the major literary prizes like the Booker. I think the Booker comes in around 150 entries a year as well. So it's a lot. It's one of the least fun things is when you get your 10 copies of every book and, multiply that 150 times 10, that amount of unpacking and collating is fun. We have a magic cupboard where we store all of the books.
I was going to say, because as
Oh yeah,
someone...
I have a similar tip away.
I like the idea of across the nations, just all these burgeoning cupboards just filled with different proofs. And what's really distinct and wonderful about the Dylan Thomas Prize is that it's not only one category of literature. That yes, there is the fact that there's an age cutoff point for the writers, but it's poetry, it's prose, short stories, and novels covered by that. I don't know enough to say that that's distinct and unique, but I can't readily or easily think of another literary prize that is seeking out and celebrating all those forms on a kind of even pitch. Obviously, there are important conversations that have happened between the judges and with Elaine and myself about, well, how do we compare these forms, and what is it if we imagine that we're somehow pitting those against one another, and what do we do as writers that come from particular disciplines but enjoy reading across literature? How do we attempt to find the best when they're in different literary forms? But I do think that as someone who's written short stories, who's written poetry and has written novels as well, maybe especially with short stories, there are very few recognitions or awards for short story writers. And it was delightful as someone sent this mystery box of long-listed pieces to know that short story writers were getting their time, that were having a proper, rigorous consideration on this kind of stage. And with all of these texts in front of me here, the quality of language and the way in which, whether it's down to syntax or patterning and recognition, the fact that text and what makes literary text this, what is it? A firework display? What is it? A lagoon? What is it? This flashback? What is possible on the page is just being celebrated in all of them. And I really want to emphasize how wonderful it is that this prize makes room for these three categories of writing.
Well, I mean, that sort of does lead us on, begs the question about how do you compare like one form to another, or even how do you just compare one book to another? But I remember I was on the debut fiction panel for the Nero Prize for the last year, but the awards were in March, and the criteria that we were given, and we had like a little WhatsApp group with the judges and the people who looked after us from Nero, looked after us very well, but the criteria was only really what we were given by the prize was, what is the book that you would feel you had to press into the hands of somebody else? That was the words. It was like, what is the book that you really felt that? And when let's just say it, when I would say things like, but what is the criteria for wanting to? And they just go, it's just the book you'd want to press into. like they chose the judges because they knew that we would make decisions based on our own expertise and passions and interests, and but also just that line, it's the book that you would not just say recommend to people, but the one you would put in people's hands, the one you go, you have to read this book. Is that, what was the relation, what is the relationship between the judges and the boss, in terms of, was there like a set of criteria, or is there sort of like, we picked you guys because you know what you're doing, so run with it? or both? Elaine, did you give a set of that's how hard do you crack that whip when it comes to the judging criteria?
Um, it's really important, given the representation on the panel. It's very important to us that, we have a panel of experts there, and they all have got their expertise to bring to the table. What's really important for us is looking for something which is, literary excellence is one of these terms that we use, but essentially what we're looking for is we're looking for young writers, because it is a Young Writers Prize, people who are doing something different, people who make you want to, who punch you in the gut, people who completely, wallop your heart when you're reading it, people who are doing something different and original, and really importantly for us, people that you can see that a prize like this with £20,000, which is a fairly decent amount of money, where it can give someone potentially the time and the headspace, so the time away from the day to day, which most of us have to do when we're writing, the time and space to be able to write without, even if just for a little while, without that significant financial pressure that they feel, so that they're able to continue and develop their careers as writers. So, for example, when you look at someone like Max Porter, I think, is a fantastic example, or Kayo Chingonyi, 2016, 2018 winners, both debuts, and the prize actually helped to shape their careers and gave them a profile and sent them out into the world. And they have done incredible stuff since then. And that's essentially what we're looking for. We're looking for innovation. We're looking for originality. We're looking for literary excellence. We're looking for something that just hits you. So whether that is, as you said, Gary, pressing a book into someone's hand because you love it so much, that's essentially what it is, isn't it? Whether it is punching you in the gut or ripping your heart out, that's the book that's doing something different. But it's no easy task for any judging panel, and I don't envy the judges having to make the decisions that they do. And from experience how difficult that is, doing the debut prize for Nero, but particularly when you've got brilliant books by brilliant young writers across all genres. I'm just glad I'm not having to make those decisions.
I think people don't really realize how hard it is. It really is to judge a prize, because particularly, I'm not saying this is different from anybody else doing it, but particularly as a writer, because you really do feel like the writer's perspective, and every time you're putting a book to one side and saying not quite, you really do feel it, Ellie, don't you? Again, we're not going to move on to the specifics of this project, but you really do feel it. You feel like, what is the thing? Sometimes it is ironically impossible to put into words why it's book A over book B. But you really do feel, and there are decisions that I made over books and we made as a panel, because the judging on the Nero was slightly different. We chose a shortlist out of books that were submitted. So we read roughly like 40 books each as a 3-panel, and then chose a shortlist each, and then we all read each other's choices. We read 40 different books each, and then read like the same 9 books, and then chose a short list of 3 from those 9. So there was a lot for us to go, maybe, no, yes, and every single one was really hard to do.
And whilst having a gut reaction or a sense of this book has made me understand or experience something that felt distance before and has new clarity, or I feel estranged from it but in an excited, energized way, any comment you make about that book, inevitably you put that to one side, you return to your own writing, you think, I have to hold my work to the same standard, and any critique I've made of their work, I, for my part, would say I have made claims for what I wanted their book to do or what I wish it had included, and maybe that's a reason for it not to be on the list. It You then have to be honest about, well, do I attempt to do that in my work? Was I either splitting hairs or trying to find fault with books simply because I knew that there could only be a certain number of works on a shortlist? And that I think that's a good guiding principle to have, to say, is this considering the book as its own discrete experience that a reader would have with it? Or am I seeing it as part of a cohort of books, and who is going to be on that cohort? So it is quite an unnatural and it is an artificial way of reading. And I'm very glad that with some of the books, many of the books on the long list, I'd read them already. I'd already had that moment as a reader with the text, so that a return to it came with this new role. At the same time, with others, I was just delighted that I had the chance to come across that book, which otherwise I wouldn't have had by my side. And with many of them now, will be favorite books of mine, I'm sure, for forever. Yes, I suppose, considering your question of what is it as a writer to be thinking about writing, to be thinking about comparisons and critiques, not as a reviewer, but as someone judging for an award like this. Although it wasn't put to the judges we had to do this, I definitely had on my mind, in the spirit of Dylan Thomas's writing, if not the man himself, then in the work that he produced, the innovation that was there, the wit and smarting effect that his writing can have on a reader. I found that a useful, as I say, principle while reading. Did this work quicken in that way? Did it make me alive to language? And dare I say that there are many books that do beautiful things with a laconic grace, that do beautiful things with pastiche and parody, that are such wonderful experiences one can have with literature. So this idea of energy and quickening and strangeness and estrangement doesn't make for better literature necessarily. But I do think that this being an award named after Dylan Thomas, him having this presence, an important presence for the award, that was something that for me was important while I was reading to bear in mind. And certainly in conversation with the other judges, making sure that, and Elaine was presiding over these conversations to make sure that we were doing this, that we were in dialogue with one another. It wasn't a case of, look, we're advocating for this book and let's see who wins out of pitting them against one another. It was very much a case of singing the praises and making sure that we were being critical, that we were understanding that there is no reader, capital R, that will have one response to a book, and making sure that was an element of the winnowing process, I suppose. It's a shame that it is a winnowing process rather than a celebration of all of them. And I know, as someone who was on the long list last year and then shortlisted, genuinely, that is a reward in and of itself. The idea that my book had been read by that panel and that I was anywhere near the quality of the works that were on that shortlist, and the winner, Yasmin Zahir, was an extraordinary gift, really. And I do hope that all of the authors on this year's shortlist, I'm looking forward to talking to them as these events roll out in May. I just know that they will be celebrating each other and what it means to be considered as on this award panel.
Wales Arts Review is back, and it's a podcast. Or rather, the new Wales Arts Review is being built before your very eyes around the central column of my conversations with some of the most interesting and vital cultural figures working today. But for us to survive and grow this time, we very much need your help. If you like what we're doing, like what we stand for, then like our posts, and most importantly, subscribe. The more subscribers to our Substack newsletter and YouTube channel, the better placed we will be to grow and pay writers to tackle the most pressing cultural subjects of the day. Via Substack, you can become a paid subscriber and gain access to exclusive content and an ever-growing Wales Arts Review archive. And by hitting the subscribe button on our YouTube channel, not only do you let the platform know you'd like to see more of our stuff, but you increase the chances of us drawing down revenue from ads. All that goes back into Wales Arts Review to help us grow and improve. We need your support. Press those buttons and then go and enjoy our stuff. It's all for you anyway. Yeah, it's interesting that we're 20 odd minutes in and we haven't mentioned the guy whose name is on the prize until Eley just mentioned him then, and I think that's really interesting to take that on rather than it be a sort of guideline criteria of the prize, to take that on and think about his I should say Dylan Thomas. We're not skirting around saying his he who shall not be named, but but to take on some of the sort of guiding ethos of what was in his work, and as you say, in his work rather than as a man. You don't want to be judging the writers on how many days they can live on bar snacks alone, really, do you? That wouldn't be quite what you're after. But Elaine, it's the Dylan Thomas Prize. How does Thomas himself cast a shadow over the prize, or is it now, all these years later? How old is the prize? 20 years, 25 years, something like that. Is it has he become just the name of the prize? Is it just a sort of branding exercise now, or or was it always a branding exercise, or a mixture of both? Does he still, as a writer, as a figure, cast a shadow over the running of the prize?
I mean, the prize, I became involved in the prize back in 2013, and that's whenever the prize came under the management of Swansea University. But it was running before that, from 2006 when it was first established. This is actually the 20th anniversary this year, 2026. And it was set up as the Dylan Thomas Prize, and the rationale for that was that Dylan Thomas himself was an international writer, hugely experimental and gifted, and what the organisers and the president and the founders of this prize wanted was for Swansea and South Wales to have a literary prize which could become truly international, and which essentially would celebrate Dylan Thomas's creativity and productivity. Very much with a focus on a young person's prize. And that was the rationale for it. And it was always very much about taking the prize and Wales, and literature and this literary figure from Wales to the world, but equally bringing international young writers from across the world to Wales. And that's always been really important to the prize, which is where then the whole Dylan Ed educational program comes in. What's really interesting too is that the writers who have gone on to be shortlisted and to win the prize, it's really interesting how many of them actually speak about Dylan Thomas and the influence of Dylan Thomas on their work, the inspiration of reading Dylan Thomas for the first time, and so on. So there's this lovely kind of full circle moment throughout all the editions of the prize, really, since I've been involved with it. but yes, essentially that's what our aim is. Our aim is to celebrate international young writers, to be able to take the prize out, something that we in Swansea and in Wales are really proud of, to take it to the world, but really importantly to take back, to bring back and to give back to Swansea and South Wales and beyond. I mean, we do events all over, with literature festivals all across the world. And we also have our annual celebration of the shortlist in London, which is happening this year on the 13th of May at the British Library, who have become a fantastic partner for us and have hosted the shortlist celebration for several years now, including last year when Eley was part of that event. And that goes back to what Eley was saying about the celebration of books and the celebration of the writers on this list, because it's really, really important to us as a prize that we are celebrating these brilliant 6 books, which is essentially why we have the shortlist celebration the night before in London. It's about celebrating every writer on this list because these books are incredible. It's about bringing them together and helping them to feel like they are part of a community or family, for want of a better term, in terms of connecting with each other, connecting with us at the prize, and then taking them all then to Swansea the following day for the awards ceremony where we make the winner announcement on the night. So that's essentially where the Dylan Thomas branding is something that came to us, but it's incredibly important to us still because it does acknowledge creativity and innovation and things that we're really proud of with the prize. And just as Dylan Thomas wrote across all genres, it's precisely why we also celebrate all genres of writing through this prize. And then we interconnect that with educational programs for young people from the age of 8 all the way up to 18. And then at undergraduate level with our Dylan Thomas Prize module, where we have our final year undergrad studying every year the live long list of 12 books and are doing incredible things. The non-traditional courses that we really need at universities, where they're doing things like book talks and they're writing blurbs and reviews and so on and creating portfolios and interviewing the shortlist. So they have their own podcast series where they interview the shortlist as well. So all of those elements combined, I feel, in the spirit of Dylan Thomas, are things that we are trying to do the best as we can. But making it a prize which is inclusive across the board, not just as in terms of the Literary Award itself, but in terms of what the prize is giving back. And it's a giving back component of that, which is really important to all of us and particularly important to me.
I love and I always have, I love the idea that the night in London is the warm-up gig for the night in Swansea.
Yeah.
It's so often the other way around, so that's nice. Then it's nice that it works that way. Let's have a talk about the books on the shortlist, because I've just looked down at my notes and realised that we're talking about these books as if they're in a slightly different dimension. We should have them named and not shamed, named and gloried. So do you want to take one each in turn and just give a little outline? Obviously, do not, and this is filmed as well, so don't even smile. You cannot give anything away. Don't even smile as you're talking about the book. I don't want to see a glint in the eye. I don't want to see, this is very deadpan. This is just one step away from getting AI to do it for us. So maybe if we do one book at a time. Eley, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah. I mean, picking genuinely at random, one in front of me, closest to my hands, Susanna V. Evans, her work Under the Blue, which we were talking about different categories of literature, published as a collection of poetry that involves prose poetry, it involves vignettes, postcards. Characters emerge and a narrative emerges across the book. It's written in 3 different sections. And throughout this attention to topics surrounding care, intimacy, familial relations, that all feels quite dry to say out loud, but done with this precision, this close examination of what is a felt experience of both having to, wanting to, and resenting elements of care as one is going through one's life. The joy that is in that, the horror that is in that, the gentle ecstasies and the completely harrowing elements are all brought to bear across this collection. I think Susanna B. Evans has done something extraordinary, that too, extraordinary. And when you see on the blurb for a word, words like shimmering and words like evanescent, you feel, oh, okay, that's a reviewer having to go to Shift F7 thesaurus. But in this case, it is entirely understandable. It is what she does with language and with treatments of persona. It makes you reach a metaphor. It feels like an expansion and a clarity of one's own relationship with these topics. A very short book full of intricacies and a delight to read.
Elaine, what are you going to grab up first?
So I'll start with Harriet Armstrong, To Rest Our Minds and Bodies, which is published by indie press Les Fugitives. It's a debut. Harriet is the youngest writer on the shortlist. She's in her mid-20s, and this is a book which has an anonymous narrator. And it's a young woman who is a psychology undergraduate in her final year, and she develops this romantic obsession for a computer science postgrad called Look. And it's a book which has such a uniqueness but relatability of voice from my perspective. It's hugely gripping. It's very vulnerable. It's very honest. It is something which deals with gender relations, topics like consent and neurodivergence. It tracks the disintegration of a young woman's sense of herself through her experiences in final year and through these relationships with the world around her and with the people around her. And I find it utterly gripping from the opening pages and unforgettable. And it's a voice, we talk about uniqueness of voice, but for me, there was something very different about this voice. And I loved the way in which Harriet interplayed with the whole concept of the title and that idea of resting. What's the balance between the rest of the mind and the body? It captures the pain and pleasure of first love, and it's full of emotional intensity and vulnerability.
I mean, these are sounding good so far. Eley.
They're all brilliant, Gary.
Yeah, great. They're all perfect. Continuing, I suppose, what you said there about voice. Next, we have We Pretty Pieces of Flesh by Colwell Brown, a novel. I believe one of the chapters of the novel on its own was awarded the 2025 BBC Short Story Award. And I mention that not because one should or can read this as a fragmentary piece or one that should be dismantled to be read as part of the contract with the reader, but rather I think demonstrates to me how this author is able, chapter by chapter, to bring these universes of experience with real clarity and memorable, again, borrowing from what Elaine was saying, extraordinary and just thrilling to read, whilst connecting them all together in this novel, following the lives, particularly of three young women from teenagehood to in their 30s, coming from Doncaster, where, yes, the narrative perspective might be traversing kind of second, third, fourth, fourth. But what comes across is also the explosive but recognizable Doncaster accent, and the way in which thought works according to the patterns of speech and the experiences that one has as an individual. Being able to recreate that on the page is a hugely impressive feat. And just this, at times devastating, at times kind of heightening, the enthusiasm that comes with youth, the tragedy that comes with hubris. There was nothing formulaic for me about this novel, and it is a really charged and laden. That sounds like a negative, but for something that is easy to read, but hugely complex in what is being wrought on the page. We Pretty Pieces of Flesh, a brilliant novel.
Yeah, still sounding like a strong shortlist. Elaine, what's next?
So next, we have Sean Hewitt with Open Heaven. This is Sean's first novel, but he has already published the acclaimed poetry collection Tongues of Fire and Rapture's Road, and an equally acclaimed memoir, All Down Darkness Wide. This is another tale of first love, and our character is called James, and at the heart of the story is James's return to a rural environment in which he grew up, and to a time frame of 2002, and a summer when he met a young man called Luke. Luke has arrived at his aunt and uncle's nearby farm, and he is impulsive and he's charismatic, and the seasons pass and this bond emerges between these two young men, and it's something very new for James. I was completely propelled into the heart and thought processes of the main protagonist. And I find it, and I mean this in the best possible way, I find it really difficult to breathe at times because I was so immersed in it. I mean, I was so, it's just beautifully lyrical. It's absolutely exquisite. And Sean's, Sean's dexterity as a poet is absolutely there. I mean, you're just fully immersed into this beautiful landscape. And so when I say I find it difficult to breathe, I really do mean that, because I was just in there. And I particularly loved in this book the fusion and the union of time and light and body and seasonal changes, which made it very breathtakingly beautiful for me.
Ellie, how many is that? We got two more. Two more, is that right?
Yeah, two
Ellie.
more.
Ellie, let's go. What's fifth?
So, I mean, if I go next for borderline fiction, a novel by Derek Owusu. Elaine was talking there about treatments of time and place. And in this novel, there is a central character, Marcus, British Ghanaian, but we have two accounts of his life, both in the present, age 25, and how he lives between Alton and Manchester, and Marcus when he was 19. And the way in which they're alternating chapters, but by having that pendulum or that patterning, that ricocheting between these different but parallel experiences of Marcus's life, for the reader, that is exhilarating. We are finding repetition, we are finding patterns, but not in a way that distracts from the story, but enlarges and actually mimics in many ways what it is to live and to be haunted by one's past self, but also affected by imaginations to do with our future selves. I think that staging or that choreography that Derek employs there in order to attempt to narrate not only an individual's life, but also an experience of living with bipolar disorder, of expectations of events, and both regrets and celebrations of previous incarnations one has, without going to or veering to a kind of performative camp operatic notion of that. This feels a very real existential catalogue and experiential account of the impossibility of being a single clear person. And I, with language, with dialogue, with evocation of place and experience, again, just a marvelous creation that makes a reader a disturbed and marveling presence. Kind of genuinely an extraordinary experience to read this book. And yeah, again, just a brilliant work of literature, I'm afraid.
Yeah, it's the. I mean, I will admit, Derek Owusu is the only writer I've read before on the shortlist, because I was at a literature festival in Ghana a few years ago, probably much longer than a few years ago. But his stuff. I mean, he wasn't there, but his stuff was just everywhere. They're very very proud of their son over at the Payaga Festival, and so I bought a couple of his books there. And yeah, he's a wonderful writer. I'm not on the judging panel, so I can smile when I talk about the work of an individual writer. But yeah, I think he's a fantastic writer. It was so great to see him up on the shortlist. And Elaine, last but not least, obviously, because these are done in no particular order.
Yeah, exactly. Last and definitely not least, Sasha Debevic McKenney, Joy is My Middle Name, which is a debut poetry collection. Can't really, I think Eley will agree with me, you can't really talk about this collection without smiling. It's although there are parts of it that are very dark, but it's also very funny, it's very smart. I find this a really exciting new voice. I particularly love the accessibility of the voice and the conversational tone. And that, I think, is very, very hard to achieve, particularly when there's such depth right across this collection. So to be able to create a voice which sounds conversational as if you're sitting around the table with your friends, I think is an incredible achievement. This is a collection that gives us a sweeping picture of the US today. So you can imagine all sorts of things that arise here. It's a young woman at its center, moving through her 20s into her early 30s. It's a collection that looks at race, womanhood, addiction, sex, pop culture, you name it, it's in there. Consumerism, it's all in there. I also particularly loved in this collection that Sasha was doing things that I found formally inventive. So, for example, there's a fantastic opening poem, which is built around lines from stand-up routines. And I just thought that was absolutely fantastic. There's a beautiful tenderness in this collection as well. It's filled with humanity and humor. And although the primary focus is on the everyday, there's also beautiful links back to the historic. And so that is woven through threads throughout the collection. And yeah, I mean, to be able to capture a huge array of themes, bring it together, the contemporary and the historic, with this voice which is playful and bold, to me, it just makes for an absolutely wonderful collection.
Fantastic. That was brilliant. Thank you, guys. I was thinking. I think about this when the Dylan Thomas Prize comes around every year, but more and more as I sort of trundle through my late 40s now, just how young the prize is. Like when you're in your 30s, you don't think that a 39 cutoff point is a young person's prize at all, and then you get into your 40s and realize that it's so young. But I'm interested in how important that is. Ellie, do you think that like there are things being done by writers who are in the early stages of their careers? Have you noticed anything, not just in the reading of the shortlist, but in general? Have you there are more chances being taken, or more experimentalism, or do you think there's something that marks out the writing of early career writers as opposed to perhaps writers who have had a few successes and at least in theory think they know what works? I don't know.
I'm not sure. I think that with any contest that makes age the criteria, it would be wrong of me to say that this is what an under 40 writer is doing, or this is what they're attempting to do. But certainly for myself, and recognizing in many of these texts an ability to not be honing one's work, but rather being ambitious for one's work feels key. That can be true of someone who's 80, that can be true of someone who's 14. But where one feels that there is an experiment being at play here in the writing, and what we are seeing is the result of this experiment. It doesn't matter in a way whether the experiment works or not. It's that something has been committed to, and that there was ambition and craft and curiosity in that undertaking, rather than this is someone who is writing on spec, or is shouldering an expectation perhaps on what a novel should look like, or what poetry should look like, or what writing from a person from this part of the world should look like. Someone who is willing to, not in terms of genre, but willing to not lead the charge even, but be charged, and to have that, to have put their energy into the prospect of writing. I think that is reflected in the books here, and perhaps is something that with the Dylan Thomas Prize one can see across the board with these texts. I couldn't say that is unlike the writing for any other prize, but I think that it is interesting how many of these books, as we were describing them, reflect either people in their 30s looking at youth, or what it is to look back, all done so differently. It is not that there's the tinge of nostalgia, or the kind of the zealousness of youth looking to prove something in terms of the voice of a generation, rather that these are writers who are generative and generous in their writing, and ambitious. And I commend the Dylan Thomas Prize for supporting that, especially in terms of what Elaine referred to before with the history of the prize. £20,000 is a hell of a lot of money for anyone, but certainly when someone is at the beginning of considering, is this what I do with my time? Money is important, and the validation that comes with that money is important too. It isn't integral, but what a thing to offer to someone at that stage of writing.
So, Elaine, when do we find out the winner?
So we will announce the winner live on Thursday, the 14th of May, which is International Dylan Thomas Day. So we have our award ceremony in Swansea. All of our shortlisted authors will be there. All of our judges will be there. And lots of other gorgeous people will be joining us. So the announcement will be live from the stage 7 p.m. on Thursday, the 14th of May.
Fantastic. And that, well, depending on when the podcast goes out, which hopefully will be today, is a week away or so. So
Yeah.
that is very exciting. One question I want to ask you before we draw to a close, Elaine, because I was looking at some of the books on the bookcase behind you, is what is going on in Wales at the moment? Where are all of these like all-conquering, brilliant books coming from? Where
I know that.
I see John Doyle, Anthony
John
Shapland.
Doyle,
I've
Anthony
had,
Shapland.
yeah. I mean, what is going on? What is in the water over there in your neck of the
Well,
woods?
I don't know what's in the water, but oh my God, it is incredible. I mean, Anthony Shapland and John Doyle. I mean, both of them, John this year, Anthony last year, both on the Observer's best debut writers. Anthony 1 of 10 last year, John 1 of 8 this year. Absolutely incredible. I don't know, Ellie, if you've had a chance to read either of these books yet, but I can't recommend them highly enough. They are sensational. Then Gary, you spoke to John recently, didn't you, about Communion?
He was on my BBC show last week.
Yeah.
I spoke to him last week. Yeah, and I had Anthony on when his book came out. Was it last year? Was it last year?
That was last year. Yeah, the paperback's
year,
just come out.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they are doing incredible things. And if talking about voice, I mean, I know we're coming to the end, but just talking about voice and the distinctiveness of voice and the beauty of language and the lyrical quality of both of those books and the immersive effect, I can't praise them highly enough. Both of those books and both of those writers deserve to win many, many prizes.
Well, thank you both very much for taking the time to come on the podcast. I'm very much looking forward, as I do every year, looking forward to seeing who comes out on top, but also of, broadening my TBR. Do people still say TBR? My TBR pile, my to be read pile, with the shortlist, which I try to do for like most prizes every year, and I end up. But the Dylan Thomas Prize always brings up new writers who I want to experience and read. So thanks very much for coming on the podcast, and I hope everything goes well with the judges meeting. I now know what they feel like, and they're a lot of fun, but also quite hard work. And everything goes well with the prize. Thank you both.
Thank you.
With an audience of one, you are unabandoned by crusting in the rain. You are a crowded train.